Welcome back to the deep dive. Now, when you think electroharmonics, your mind probably jumps straight to, well, chaos.
Oh, yeah. The POG, the HOG, the flanger hoax, pedals that just mangle sound in the best ways.
Exactly. But today we're diving into an EHX piece that kind of stood apart from all that glorious noise. It was a piece of gear focused squarely on professional utility, uncompromisingly so. Our sources point us to the Electroharmonix Tube EQ. Came out mid-2000s, and while maybe it doesn't have the rock star legend status of some others,
Sure.
it represented this really interesting high-fidelity mission from EHX.
Definitely.
The core appeal, the whole reason it existed really, was to deliver studio-grade equalization. But with that harmonic richness, you only get from real vacuum tubes, all packed somehow into a floor unit.
And that's pretty much our mission for you today, to understand how this specific pedal managed to bridge what was back then a pretty big gap.
Between what exactly?
Between that high-end dedicated studio rack gear, the stuff recording pros swear by, and, well, the humble stomp box. And it wasn't just tube-powered in name only, it was tube-powered properly. And that specific technical detail, that's what really shapes its tone and, honestly, its whole legacy.
Okay, let's unpack that then, this sort of high-fidelity phase for EHX.
Right.
Where does the tube EQ actually fit in their history?
Right, so it lands squarely in the mid-2000s. And it's important, I think, to see it as part of EHX's very deliberate push into what they called their high-voltage tube pedals.
High voltage. Okay.
Yeah, and that wasn't just marketing fluff. It was like an engineering statement. They were saying, look, we can deliver genuine tube tone, the real deal, without the usual compromises you see in pedals.
Right, because a lot of tube pedals aren't really running the tubes the way an amp does.
Exactly. We'll get into that. But you can see that utility focus just by looking at its siblings from that same time.
Yeah, I was looking at the lineup. It's sat alongside the English muffin distortion,
Classic.
the LPB tube preamp boost, the black finger tube compressor,
Also tube-driven, yep.
and even the two-zipper envelope filter, which was maybe more experimental, but still tube.
Right. It was this whole ecosystem, really, a serious, functional set of high-voltage tube devices.
But the tube EQ was different.
What's fascinating, is that the tube EQ wasn't about adding, like, obvious distortion or crazy modulation. Its whole purpose, its professional goal, was providing detailed studio-quality EQ plus that authentic tube warmth.
So tone shaping, tone polishing.
Precisely. Not tone-destroying, which is what we often associate with EHX, maybe.
And crucially, the target audience wasn't just us guitar players, right?
No, not at all. The unique selling point really extended beyond that. Our sources say this pedal was explicitly aimed at professional bassists, keyboard players, even engineers.
Engineers. Interesting.
Yeah, anyone who needed precise frequency shaping but absolutely wanted that underlying tube character. The kind of thing solid-state EQs just, well, they don't really deliver in the same way.
Right. Solid-state EQs can be super precise, almost surgical, but sometimes they can feel a bit cold or harsh, especially if you push the highs.
Exactly that harshness or brittleness. The tube EQ sort of promised that precision without that digital sounding edge. It was about adding a kind of sonic sheen or maybe glue to the sound, making things sit nicely.
Okay, this is where we need to get technical. This is the aha moment, like you said. How did they actually pull off that smooth, uncompromising tube sound in a pedal?
Right, let's talk engines. The tube EQ uses two 12AX7 vacuum tubes. Pretty standard preamp tubes, you find them everywhere.
Sure.
But, and this is the absolute key technical point, most pedals that stick a 12AX7 inside often run them at starved plate voltages. Meaning low voltage, maybe 9 volts DC, maybe 12. It makes the tubes compress really easily, sound kind of fizzy or thin. It's using the tube almost like a gimmick, not for its amplification properties.
Right. And that's why people sometimes say tube pedals just sound like a fuzzy overdrive, not like real tube amp response.
Precisely. EHX made, like, zero compromise here. The tube EQ ran those tubes at proper high voltages internally.
Okay, how high are we talking?
We're talking pleat voltages that get stepped way up inside the pedal, often 200 volts, maybe more. And that is absolutely essential for getting genuine tube coloration.
Which translates to?
Massive headroom. Smooth, musical, harmonic response. Not fizz.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
That immediately explains the power supply then. It wasn't just a standard 9-volt connector?
Nope. It needed that big, dedicated 12-volt AC adapter, alternating current.
Why AC?
Because that AC input allowed the internal power transformer to step the voltage up so dramatically. That massive power draw was basically the price you paid for true tube headroom.
So that meant?
It meant that when you boosted, say, the mids by 15 dB, the tube circuitry didn't immediately clip or squash the sound like those starved plate designs often do. It gave you studio-style polish, not just tube-flavored fuzz.
That's a huge difference in how it operates. You're dealing with a bigger power brick, maybe more noise potential, but you get EQ curves that stay clear even when you crank them.
Exactly. And once you have that high-voltage foundation, the controls themselves become incredibly powerful. You had the standard low, mid, and high EQ bands.
Right.
All capable of a lot of adjustment. Plus or minus 15 decibels. That's enough sculpting power to totally change the character of an amp or fix a muddy bass tone.
And the sources really emphasize that mid control.
Oh, yeah. Running through a proper tube circuit like that, adjusting the mids wasn't just about frequency cuts or boosts, it was textural. You could dial in punch or clarity, but the tube warmth kind of gave that frequency presence without it sounding like an ice pick, you know?
Yeah, I get that warmer presence.
And then you also had that separate gain control. This is important because it let you use the whole EQ section, almost like a preamp stage.
How so?
Well, you could run it totally clean, just using the EQ. Or you could dial in just enough gain to introduce that really subtle, nice tube compression and a bit of light saturation before the signal even hit your amp.
Like an always-on tone sweetener?
Kinda, yeah. Or clean boost with EQ.
Physically, though, it definitely reflected that no-compromise approach. It was big.
Huge. It used that large sheet metal chassis, very much like the LPB tube from the same era. Really robust look. It definitely wasn't designed to squeeze onto a crowded pedal board between your tuner and chorus.
No kidding.
It was built like a tank because, basically, it had a little power plant inside. EHX clearly prioritized the function, the sound, over the pedal board format wars. Right down to the vent slots cut into the metal to let the heat from those 12 AX7s escape.
And that size, that power need. Kind of ironic, right? It made it an immediate candidate for being discontinued later when smaller pedals took over.
Absolutely. Foreshadowing its own demise, in a way.
Size aside for a moment, let's talk sound. Musical results. What did players actually do with this high-voltage beast beyond just basic EQ tweaks?
Well, primarily it really excelled as a clean tone shaper. Because those high-voltage tubes ensured everything stayed smooth, it was fantastic for just refining an amp's natural voice.
Like if your amp was a bit boxy sounding.
Exactly. The tube EQ could gently scoop those boxy frequencies or maybe add some sparkle to the top end, but without introducing that kind of metallic harshness that some solid-state graphic EQs can have.
So it wasn't just fixing problems, it was adding something fundamental, adding that tube feel maybe.
Absolutely. That's where its dual function as a subtle preamp really came into play. Lots of musicians, apparently, would set the EQ knobs fairly flat, but push the gain just a touch.
Why?
To get that little bit of tube sag and warmth, using it almost as an always-on foundational part of their tone, like a really high-quality, clean tube buffer, but with the potential for serious boosting if emitted.
Or the other way around.
Right.
Run the gain slightly hot and then boost the mids hard with the EQ.
Yeah.
That sounds like an amazing solo boost.
Oh, it completely transforms a solo. You're not just making it louder, you're boosting the harmonic density, the complexity, the warmth from the tubes. Helps those boosted mids really cut through a mix without sounding thin or shrill.
Yeah, that's different from just stomping on a clean boost.
Fundamentally different, yeah.
And the versatility seems key here in the sources. Guitarists used it before or after distortion pedals, but bass players really grabbed onto it too.
Oh, bassists loved it. Because tubes, arguably, are even more critical for handling low frequencies well. The tube EQ let them get that really specific fat, round, low end, but also warm, articulate mids.
How did it help the lows?
It helped prevent the lows from becoming sort of flabby or indistinct. It injected this controlled bloom that's really essential for a great bass tone, especially in a band context. Keeps things big but tight.
Okay, but the really surprising use case, the one that gives this pedal its true kind of cult status now, involves using it outside the usual guitar or bass rig.
Right. We found references to recording engineers actually using this thing as a DI box.
A DI box, like for recording direct.
Yeah, often with synthesizers, keyboards, sometimes even applying tube character and EQ to vocals during tracking.
Wait, a floor pedal for tracking vocals? That seems wild. Especially thinking about noise floor, impedance matching. What were they getting from it that a dedicated studio EQ or preamp wouldn't give them?
I think the key was the specific flavor. The unique response of those 12AX7 tubes running at proper high voltage combined with that flexible EQ section. Remember, high-quality studio tube gear is often really expensive.
True.
The tube EQ offered a specific coloration, right? A kind of harmonic smoothing effect that was pretty unique to that high-voltage stomp box design. It wasn't about being perfectly transparent. It was about adding a subtle, maybe flattering texture and making gentle EQ moves that sounded inherently musical because of the tubes. It just treated the signal with a warmth that was hard to get affordably otherwise.
So if we zoom out now and connect this back to the bigger EHX story, this pedal is actually a really significant data point, isn't it?
It really is. The tube EQ represented the completely practical professional side of Electro Harmonix. It showed the company could pivot from, psychedelic experiments to serious studio-level utility.
Using the same core tech, vacuum tubes, but just applying it differently.
Exactly, applying it with precision. It stands in pretty stark contrast to something like the tube zipper, even though they technically share the same high-voltage tube lineage. One is pure utility, the other is pure chaos.
As professional and amazing as it sounded, that huge size and the need for that specific AC power supply eventually became its Achilles heel, right?
Totally. We know it was phased out sometime in the late 2000s, which was right when the whole industry started shifting towards smaller pedal board footprints.
Yeah, the rise of the mini pedal.
Exactly. EHX themselves shifted hard towards their smaller XO and then the nano enclosures. And this big metal beast, the Tube EQ, just didn't fit that new model. It got left behind.
And that discontinuation, ironically, is probably why it has such an enduring importance now, that cult appeal in the used market.
Precisely. It's kind of a relic from an era when EHX, at least with this line, genuinely believed that ultimate tone should trump portability concerns.
Okay, so let's try and boil down those key takeaways from the sources one last time. Why does this big, discontinued, slightly awkward pedal still matter today?
Okay, first, because it delivered true high-voltage tube EQ in a stomp box. That specific combination is still incredibly rare. Most tube pedals, like we said, compromise the voltage, and most EQ pedals are solid-state, often graphic EQs. The Tube EQ offered this unique middle ground.
Right. Second point.
Second, it really showcased EHX's engineering capability. It proved they could genuinely compete with studio equipment in terms of sheer sonic quality and performance, even if they packaged it for the floor.
Okay.
Third, it cemented the legacy of their whole utility line. It took the original LPB boost concept and just elevated it into the professional tube gear world. It wasn't just an effect. It was designed to be a core part of a serious rig.
And
finally, it's a perfect historical marker. It shows EHX's dual identity back in the mid-2000s, this really practical, essential utility gear existing right alongside the wild, boundary-pushing experimental stuff they're maybe more famous for. They were serving both the serious engineer and the sonic adventurer at the same time.
So the final summary seems pretty clear then. The Tube EQ was this uncompromising utility pedal. It prioritized authentic tube fidelity achieved through that critical high-voltage design over standard stomp box convenience and size.
Yeah, it was massive, it was power-hungry, and you could argue maybe it was just too good, too bulky for the modern pedal board trend.
Which really brings up a fascinating and, I think, important question for you, the listener, especially as you're thinking about your own ideal setup. Given that the Tube EQ was ultimately kind of killed off by its sheer bulk and its complex power needs problems the industry is still grappling with, right? How much size or complexity or specific power requirements are you actually willing to put up with in your rig to retain that absolute, no-compromise high-voltage tube authenticity?
That's a great question. Does chasing true studio-grade quality in a pedal always mean you have to sacrifice portability or convenience? Or is the quest for the ultimate tone sometimes worth, dedicating a big chunk of pedal board real estate and carrying around a special power supply?
Something to think about next time you're looking at the space on your board.